All right, guys, so it's been a while since I've made a video, but I keep getting asked, what do I do for a living? How much does the car cost? How fast does it go? All those types of things. But one of the things that I get asked all the time is, what do I do for a living? And I got into truck sales, like semi-trucks, about 15 years ago. I was actually working at a company called Ultimate Electronics, installing home theater equipment, satellite systems, car audio, car alarms, all that kind of stuff. A little bit of a techie back in the day, and I was at this guy's house installing some equipment for him, and he and I got to talking. I was at his house all day, and it was kind of strange. Like, I don't know, it was like 2 months later, out of the blue, he calls me, and he says, "Hey, you should come work for me." And at the time I was 22, 23 years old, making 35, 36,000 a year, which wasn't a whole lot, but I was busting my ass to make that. I had just bought a house. I was 22. I built a house, making that much money. But I had a house, had a car, barely making ends meet. Pretty stressful situation to be just up and leaving my pretty comfortable job for something new. But I went and interviewed with him, and the trucks were tangible. It was something you could touch and feel, and I was like, you know what, I think I can do this. So that day I went back to the office, got with my foreman, told him I was going to quit the job, gave him my 2 weeks, and I was going to go sell semi-trucks. Everybody kind of laughed at me a little bit, but I got into it, and I got pretty good at it. I had a really good mentor. He was the guy that called me and hired me, and he was an excellent mentor for me. Taught me everything he knew, threw me right in the middle of stuff that I was really stressed out about, but he had me do it anyways. I figured it out. Within a couple of years after that, I became a manager at a dealership. I got pretty savvy at being a manager, made tons of relationships nationwide, and I really wasn't a relationships person, and I realized a couple of years into selling trucks how important those relationships were. So I started creating relationships with other dealers nationwide, and I was one of the younger guys doing this. Most of the guys in this industry, especially 20 years ago, were quite a bit older. They were kind of born and bred into this industry, and I was that new younger generation that was a little bit more savvy when it came to computers and uploading images online and doing stuff like that. So I was able to find a niche in it. Did pretty well. 2016, started my own little dealership, and all I do now is buy and sell big rigs. I also do buy and sell exotic cars here and there. I think I've sold about 6 Murcielagos and a Venador, some pretty cool Mustangs like a Cobra R, a GT350R, a couple AMG Mercedes, some pretty cool cars, but for the most part I really focus on the big stuff. So to answer the question, what I do for a living, that's it. Have a little dealership here in Salt Lake City, Utah. It's called Big Rig Truck Sales. Really enjoy what I do, and I'm sure glad that it worked out for me. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, one of the other questions is, what is and where did your passion for Lamborghini come from? I was just a 7 or 8 year old kid, and I was at a mall, and I went into this little store that it was kind of like it was called the Keychain, and it had tons of just little odds and end knick-knack stuff, posters on the wall and stuff. And there was this huge poster about 6-7 feet long of a black Countach 5000 QV, and instantly I just fell in love with that car. I wanted it, and so I went to my mom and I asked her, hey, could I get the poster? And I really didn't ask for very many things as a kid, but that was one of those things where I just really wanted it. My mom could tell. It wasn't that expensive. She got it for me and hung it on my wall. And I had that car hanging on my wall for years. And I mean, there were those times where you're in your room, you're all alone, and I would just imagine myself inside that car driving it. Just that feeling of what it would be like to own it myself. And so that ultimately ended up becoming like that passion for me for Lamborghini, but also it was my driving force, because Where I came from and where I grew up, nobody had a car anywhere near that caliber. And so many people, when you tell them how, yeah, I'm going to own a Lamborghini one day, the answer is no, you're not, or good luck, or why would you want to own one of those anyways? And so it was always kind of a negative response. But in my own head, I was never negative about it. I always, I just wouldn't even listen to that negativity in my head, or it just never even crossed my mind that it wouldn't happen for me. When I got a little bit older, going to college and all that stuff, you start realizing how difficult this situation might be to force yourself to work hard enough to figure it out. And I ended up dropping out of college because I realized that it wasn't for me. I wanted to find a career path in business that I would really enjoy, and so that's when it all started for me. I got lucky enough that somebody recognized that I might have a talent in something I didn't even know, which was sales. And luckily he recognized that in me, gave me that opportunity. And he was the one that told me, hey, you can make 6 figures a year doing this, but it's going to be difficult. And if you don't make 6 figures a year doing this, I'm probably going to fire you. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. Like, you recognize here's this opportunity to go out there and financially be able to achieve my goal of owning a Lamborghini. But in the same hand, if I'm not good enough, it's not going to happen. And then you start worrying about, well, if I'm not, then where's it going to come from after that? So I, put my nose to the grindstone, worked my ass off, learned everything I could about what industry I jumped into, and did the best that I could. My first opportunity to buy a Lamborghini came in 2012. And it was a 2002 Lamborghini Murcielago, black in color. And it actually originally sold out of the dealership we used to have here called Exotic Imports. The car ended up making it all the way up into Ohio. I ended up buying it, bringing it back to Salt Lake, and it was an excellent car. And that was my first opportunity of owning a Lamborghini and figuring out what it was like and recognizing that they're actually really well-built cars. I had heard tons of horror stories about buying an exotic car and all that stuff. But I was a pretty savvy person. I'm very mechanical, and things like that don't scare me. So I jumped into it anyways, and I'm sure glad I did. I wish I would have jumped into it earlier, because I did have some opportunities a little bit earlier, and I didn't take them. I really wanted a Countach, and by the time I got onto the Countach board, into the Lamborghini world, Countaches were a little too expensive for me. But the Murcielagos were a great value, still are today. Diablo is great value. They're starting to go up in value. Countaches are getting really expensive, and they should be. I mean, these cars were hand built. They're limited production, and they're beautiful. And I have a huge feeling that the Countach, of course, the Miuras, Countaches, but even the Diablos and Murcielagos, I think, are just really going to start taking off and be almost unattainable. For the guys that have been looking at them. So if you're looking to get one, I would recommend trying to get one soon. So with all that being said, might as well come right back to the car itself and discuss a little bit about this Diablo that I acquired. I haven't had it too long, but I sure love the car. I feel like I'm a pretty good contributor to the forums and help guys out a lot. And, on the little DIY stuff, things that need to be taken care of on these cars as you go. And this car was owned by one of the gentlemen that was on the Lamborghini forums. Great guy. And he and I had a little bit of acquaintance prior to me purchasing this car from him on a car that I was selling. He and I talked about it a while back. And so I kind of got to know him. And he ended up posting this car for sale, so I got a hold of him. We talked in great detail about the car, went over a lot of things. The car needed some stuff. He did an amazing job, acquiring this GT body and having it installed properly. The hours and hours and hours that went in to putting this car together and putting it together properly, I can't imagine the amount of stress and everything it cost him, but I know it took him a couple of years to get it to where he wanted it. It was in the shop for a long time. And not only that, but he redid the interior as well. So the interior got redone, and he did a phenomenal job at that as well. So he really focused on the cosmetics of the car and the overall fit and finish. And I mean, this car honestly is probably put together better than the 01 6.0 Verde Ithaca car that I had, and that car was completely restored. So this car has realistically almost been restored, and he did a phenomenal job at it. Updated the interior, updated the dash so it's more like a 6.0, proper 6.0 seats. But there were a couple little things, being it's a 27-year-old car, that they just couldn't get to as they were going, or as they're going, they just start kind of needing attention after you put the car back together. So I've put about 100 hours of my own time into this car, just going through every little thing that it needed, and it's just such a proper car now. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do.